Seems to be the hardest part.
Un second. Welcome back. I hope you have enjoyed this song, ladies.
Yes, very much.
Now we are going to talk about Human Rights Watch in Tunisia, and our guest is Emna Guellali. Emna, welcome to RTCI.
Thank you, Adnen.
We have also Rihab.
Thank you, Helen.
Welcome to RTCI, Rihab. So who's Emna Guellali?
Well, I just introduced, of course, the professional side.
Go ahead, please.
I'm a researcher for Human Rights Watch, which is an organization, an NGO, quite famous internationally, founded in 1978. We have opened an office here in Tunisia, and I'm the head of the office for Tunisia and for Algeria as well. And before that, I just joined, 7 months ago, I joined the Human Rights Watch, but before that I was living in The Hague and working with the International Criminal Court. And I decided to come back to Tunisia after 10 years, and because of the revolution which brought me back here.
I would like to ask you about your experience in Hague.
The Hague, the city, or the International Criminal Court?
Both.
The city is, it's a nice city, but it's quite dull and boring. Like everybody else says the same. And most of the times it's empty the weekend because people leave to Paris, which is 3.5 hours from The Hague to go and have some nice time in Paris. So it's,
what about
it's a dull city.
The criminal court?
The International Criminal Court was, I worked there 2 years and a half, and it was quite an interesting and amazing experience, I must say.
What have you learned from the experience in The Hague?
First of all, it's an amazing international organization because so many people work there. It's highly professional, and I had the opportunity to work on different situations such as Georgia, Côte d'Ivoire, Palestine, and it was really interesting. The International Criminal Court is now going through a big change because I used to work with the Office of the Prosecutor, and now they have a new prosecutor, so I guess it will be very interesting to follow what happens with their policy.
I'm wondering, will they still be looking for that ever elusive definition of terrorism, to which they still didn't have an answer? Yeah,
because terrorism was since the beginning of the Rome Conference. The Rome Conference was the conference that initiated or gave birth to the International Criminal Court in 1998. And the terrorism was not included as a crime as such in the Rome Statute as a crime, as an international crime. But terrorism can also take the form of a crime against humanity, which is a crime under the jurisdiction of the court. So it's quite, it's a very elusive term, but it can find some very concrete application through the International Criminal Court statute.
I hope so. Because one of the reasons why there's such difficulty in this is what's being said, at least by some researchers, there's such difficulty in finding a definition for terrorism is because, in a sense, once we do define it, we'll start pointing fingers who are terrorists and who aren't terrorists. For example, in conflicts such as the Arab-Israeli conflict and, in certain areas where we have problems of dictatorship, who's going to be the terrorist?
There is a famous saying in that one freedom's fighter is another terrorist person. So someone who is a freedom fighter for someone, for a whole population or a whole movement, freedom movement, will be considered as a terrorist by someone else. So obviously it's very difficult to do.
And some people do not really know the role of Human Rights Watch in the region.
In the region we are everywhere in the region. So we have offices in Cairo, we have an office in Beirut, which covers as well Syria, and we have an office in Libya, and in Tunisia covering
Algeria.
They are all busy. Even in Tunisia we are very busy. But the office, to focus more on the office in Tunisia, it was opened after the agreement with the government.
Which government?
With the transitional government before the elections.
Oh, okay.
And so it's quite recent. We have an office now, and our work really focuses on everything which has to do with human rights. So we have a broad spectrum of issues that we cover, but this year we have mainly focused on freedom of expression and following all the incidents, the problems that arose after the election and even before the elections on freedom of expression and the assault on journalists and other people. We have also really very much focused on justice and the justice system, but more specifically on the trials that are taking place.
The martyrs.
In the CAF and in Tunis as well for the killing of protesters. We have issued Q&A, question and answers on that. It's a kind of report, but in the form of a question and answer, answering to some questions that everybody is asking himself about, like because this trial is a historical trial, but in the same time there has been a lot of talk, a lot of questioning of the trial itself and how the process, and we have tried to answer to these questions from our point of view, of course, from our perspective. But we have also focused on attacks against individual freedoms by religiously motivated groups. I don't like to use the term Salafist or whatever, because this is stigmatizing, but we have focused on that as well.
Emna, how would you describe the situation of human rights in Tunisia?
I would say...
Or evaluate?
Yeah, it's because it's quite a broad question, but to try to answer to your question, I think we are facing a turning point. We are really facing a turning point, and we have seen a deterioration of the situation of human rights in Tunisia from the first transitional period to the second one. Because the first one, there were a lot of gains in terms of human rights. A lot of things that were done which were really very positive, such as the adherence of Tunisia to several international conventions. We have joined the International Criminal Court, for example, becoming the 116 state country to the state party to the International Criminal Court. We have joined and we have ratified several other conventions, such as the Convention on the against the disappearance, the Second Protocol on torture, etc. And all this, it's an arsenal which is like really very useful for the future. There was also quite an interesting overhaul of some of the laws that were used by the former regime in order to stifle dissent and like put people in jail, etc. But in the second transitional period, which is after the elections, I think there is a very clear trend of deterioration for human rights situation, because some of the reforms were kind of halted. We didn't see them applied. For example, the law, the decree law 116, which was supposed to create this high commission for the oversight of the audiovisual, and it wasn't created. In terms of the reform of the judiciary, there was a lot of rhetoric, a lot of talk about how to reform the judiciary, and a lot of initiatives from the different stakeholders, but so far there is no concrete step. And on the opposite, we have seen very clear signals toward even imposing more the stranglehold of the Ministry of Justice on the judges through the recent events. Of course, we won't go back to the.
We'll go back to the events, and Emna, you'll be talking also about anti-terrorism law and the case of Baghdadi Mahmoudi as well. Do you feel guilty?
No, we don't feel guilty, because we as an organization, I mean, we've tried our best in terms of issuing some pressers. We have asked we have sent letters to the government and asking them not to extradite Baghdadi Mahmoudi.
You know why I'm asking the question?
Yes.
Because Blue have said that they were guilty. So let's listen to the song. And I'll be back. Guilty by Blue. Enjoy. Welcome back. Very nice song by Blue, Guilty. But Emna Guellali doesn't feel guilty.
I don't.
You don't. And we actually has the question.
Well, yeah, and I mean, being a young Tunisian, person, woman, etc., students of IR, and I know that most of us are hoping to see ourselves or see our children or see our, students in Tunisia, reach certain positions or try to do something good for their country. I'd like to ask you, how did you get to the ICC? How did you get to Human Rights Watch to preside, over the Tunisian and Algerian branch?
Yeah, it was a long journey, and it started a few years ago already, because my first position, it was in Tunisia, and I was working with the international the committee of the International Committee of the Red Cross. Then I went to Florence and did my PhD in international law and humanitarian law. And as everybody,
You're talking about the Italian Florence?
Of course.
So you speak Italian?
I speak Italian, yeah, I do speak Italian.
You'll have to stay for the Italian language program with Mohammed Benzi.
Wow, with pleasure. It's been a long time I haven't spoken Italian, so it's good for me for my training.
Absolutely. Is that at the EUI?
This is exactly the EUI, it's the European University Institute, and it's quite a very, very interesting place to be for if you want to promote. I will make the promotion of this place, because it's first of all, it's wonderful, it's gorgeous, but also it's one of the best universities in Europe, and it's only doctoral studies, so you don't have first or second degree, you have only the doctoral students, and I had the chance of being of doing my PhD there.
And making us proud.
Actually, she looks Italian.
It took me some time though to finish my PhD. It took me 5 years, not for a good reason, because I was enjoying so much the place that I dragged the process of finishing
the best of two worlds.
Finishing my PhD. Then I applied for the International Criminal Court, and I would like to dispel here some of the mystification about international organizations and the fact that you have to know people in order to get to international organizations and have a foot there. This is not true, at least from my experience. I mean, I just applied like anyone else, and I got selected. But of course, like going through the whole process of selection, which is always quite a long process. Then after 2 years, and after what happened in Tunisia, I really wanted to come back, and there was a position which it was blooming at that time. Of course, like all the NGOs were opening positions, and I really liked the work of Human Rights Watch, which I was following since I was doing my PhD, and I applied. They opened the position on Tunisia and Algeria, and I applied. I went through the whole process of recruitment, and of course the written test and the oral test and all these steps, and finally.
And now you're here on FTC talking about your experience.
Exactly, and it's nice.
It's wonderful.
So, as a local observer, Emna, do you believe things have improved after the revolution?
Yeah, we started with this question a little bit, and I think my stake on the situation was a little bit negative, saying that I think there is quite a deterioration of the situation in terms of human rights safeguards, and especially we have the impression that things are stalled, that there is no progress in any field, which while in the beginning or after the revolution there was we had made very important strides toward the improvement of the human rights situation, and now there is a kind of a stalled situation in terms of the adoption of judiciary, the transitional justice measures, the reform of the media, etc. All these very important and pillar reforms are still not implemented, and I think this is creating a situation and an atmosphere of distrust from the professionals who are working in these sectors toward the ministries and toward the authorities. But there are positive things. For example, these gains that we have since the revolution of adhering to international conventions. I think this is a very important thing, because it will put pressure on the government. The government will be under also the monitoring of international, more under the monitoring of international organizations. And I think the fact that the government has opened the doors to all kind of NGOs and to all kind of, I'm not talking only on this government, of course, I'm talking on all the transitional governments that have started this process. They have opened the door for international organizations, for NGOs, and we have today like a blooming field of international and NGOs, which is quite interesting. But the threats are very big, I think, especially in terms of freedom of expression. And we have seen the last, alarming attacks against artists, and with the blessing, I must say, with the blessing of the government.
Do you think it's a blessing of the government?
I think in the beginning it was, no, the blessing, like in their rhetoric, of course they were condemning the violence, but also putting the blame as a matter of fact on the artists, saying that they were provocative, that they should have exercised restraint on themselves, and this creates what it does.
Where's your position as human rights activist?
It creates censorship. It creates censorship.
Do you think it's the beginning of censorship?
I think it's the beginning of censorship. Because it is not, it's not a banal thing to say that the artists are the culprits and that they are those who have to have the blame on them. They are putting the blame on their shoulders, and I think this is not fair. While, of course, condemning the violence, but it's not, it's quite ambiguous. The condemnation of the violence when it comes with this kind of, issues of saying that the artists are to be blamed, then it's not unambiguous.
Yeah, Rihab, what do you think about the situation of human rights after the revolution? Do you think things have changed, have improved?
Well, from a personal point of view, I think after like 1.5 years since that revolution, the so-called revolution, we don't know if it's a revolution or something else, but from according to me, it's things are deteriorating, as you have said, but I'm a little bit positive. I'd rather like look at the not the empty half of the cup, but the full one. And
does this mean you're optimistic?
Yeah, kind of, like not 100%, but we have to be positive and to see like there are a lot of improvement in certain domains, but when we see the freedom of expression and freedom of expression and opinion and media are being attacked by certain groups, I think like, things are getting ugly, but we have to work together and not to like be violent with those who are against us or who refuse our ideas. And hopefully things will be better in the future. It's like a long journey, and we have to take it step by step, and hopefully the future is a little bit like more shinier now.
We have to take care of this country, and this is what Drake and Rihanna say. They say, take care, enjoy. I'll Take Care of You, very nice song by Rihanna. Emna, are you taking care of the people in Tunisia as an NGO?
I do my best. I mean, I'm trying hard to do my work properly and to follow everything. I try to meet people. This is like the core of our work, is to interview people, interview victims, those who are suffering, those who have suffered injuries or who have suffered abuses in the past or in now, and to get the chance to make recommendations to the government on how it should respond, and to really do advocacy so that the situation of these people could be better.
Have you interviewed former political prisoners?
I haven't so far, because we have focused mostly on the situation of the injured of the revolution, because that was a burning issue. We have followed and it's still a burning issue, and we have also interviewed quite many victims who are claiming, they filed complaints before the military tribunals for the killing of their sons and brothers and etc. Former political prisoners, we have followed them a lot during the Ben Ali regime, especially, of course I wasn't working with Human Rights Watch at that time, but my colleagues would come for various missions, and they would interview former political prisoners, especially those from Nahda, that were subjected to a really very difficult time even after the prison. And we issued a report on that called A Bigger Prison, on how the oppression and the intimidation and the harassment continued for these prisoners even after they were released from the prison. And so we know quite a lot about their situation, and we have followed them. But so far, and here now in Tunisia, I think there were many burning issues for us, and we've tried to follow those.
How would you describe the situation of the Wounded of the Revolution as a Tunisian observer working for a foreign NGO?
Yeah, that was really a difficult presser to issue because, well, the process that was used by not this government, I'm talking about really the transitional governments, all of them, was a muddled process since the beginning, since the start, because instead of like taking the chance and taking the time and of adopting a comprehensive framework for their reparation, and you know that the right to reparation, when you have suffered abuse from the state government and the state state action is a right, is a human rights, then there should be a compensation, there should be a redress for these rights, for these violations, which encompass several things. For example, monetary compensation, financial compensation, but also everything which has to do with health.
Are you for the financial compensation?
I am for. I know that there was it's a very controversial issue, and several people. I mean, I understand their point of view. They said that, well, we were imprisoned to fight for our rights. We are freedom fighters again, and we don't want to have compensation for that because this is our belief. This is what we have done because we believed in that, and we don't want the state to compensate us. But I think I am taking the issue from another point of view, from the point of view of the obligation of the state, because the state has breached and has breached its obligation to ensure, to respect human rights by putting these people in jail, and it has to repair this violation of its obligation. And it's a signal for the future. You shouldn't see it only from the angle of the victims, of the victimization. You shouldn't see it only from it's also a deterrent effect, because once the state makes it clear that because there was a violation of a right, then there should be a compensation, this will become a trend, and it will become a deterrent effect for the future, for other victims. So I think it's a positive thing. Of course, then what should be monitored very closely is the process of compensation, how they would do that. Is there an independent mechanism for defining and identifying the people who should benefit? Because some of the people, of course, they were released after the revolution, but they were accused of very serious crimes. So these people obviously shouldn't be compensated. So it's the whole process that should be monitored, but as a principle, I am for the compensation.
And many former political prisoners were victims of the anti-terrorism law.
Yeah.
And after the recent developments in Tunisia and the curfew, many police agents and observers have asked for the anti-terrorism law. Do you think it's possible to apply it in Tunisia?
It is possible, but the problem is that it's completely contrary to international law, to international standards, because we have issued a report on the reform that need to be done in Tunisian law, and one of the laws that we asked to be reformed is the anti-terrorism law of 2003, because it's a law that puts everybody in the same basket, and which doesn't define, again, I mean, there is a problem of definition of the terrorism, which does not, there should be a restrictive definition of the terrorism, not only those who have supported and in a very broad terminology the issue of terrorism. And also, of course, the safeguards for due process should be exactly the same as for everybody else, even if it's someone who is accused of terrorism. And since I cover Algeria, I mean, I know a lot about how they violated due process because of the anti-terrorism law. But once you start in this kind of trend of justifying the violation of rights because of anti-terrorism and because of security, it's over for everybody, not only for the so-called terrorists, but also for the others. And this is what happened with Adnen Chaouachi, of course, because he was supposedly trying to re-establish order and to control movements which are believed to be violent, but he restricted more and more the freedoms until
in the name of freedom, in the name of security and stability.
At the end, nobody had freedom anymore. So this is what happened. That's why it is very important to stand firm on the principles and not to let these things slide out of control in terms of repressive application of the laws.
Emna Guellali, what's your response to the conspiracy theorists who claim that Human Rights Watch is being manipulated and that it has a hidden agenda? You're an insider. I think you know more than outsiders.
Yeah.